So, a very good day to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Christopher Ludwig here from Automotive Logistics and welcoming you to Your Questions Answered, a special reprisal edition of our very successful and popular live stream hour from a few weeks ago on driving innovation and production in logistics, where we were joined by some technology experts talking about innovations in the sector. And we had so many questions during the live stream that we've arranged a couple of special sessions with both of our panelists and guests from the show, and we're gonna go through the questions today. So I want to thank our sponsors for the live stream hour and the Automotive Festival of Transformation: CNW Courier Network, premium freight logistics provider serving the global automotive sector; Horizon Auto Logistics, terminal operator and finished vehicle logistics provider; ProAct International, software and IT company specialized in the supply chain and finished vehicle logistics; and Fract Logistics Solutions, a finished vehicle logistics visibility and transport management provider. So again, very specialist providers for the sector, and very relevant, in fact, to our topic today, going deeper into digitalization. My returning guest today is Bart Houthwaite Jr., Principal for the Automotive Sector at EY. Bart, of course, joined us on our live stream hour and gave us a lot of great detail about what EY is seeing happening in this space, some pathways towards digitized and more automated supply chains in what's happening now, and obviously looking out a little bit in future. So it's really my pleasure to welcome Bart back to the show. Bart, you want to come online? How are you, Bart?
Terrific, Chris. Thanks again for having me. Hopefully I can answer some of these questions that you got. I'm so pleased that folks were interested in our last session, and look forward to continuing our conversation today.
Absolutely, yeah. And as I said, there were a lot, which we covered quite a bit during the show. It was one of our longer shows, and obviously, our audience, you can view that again online on our website on demand. So do that if you haven't already. But yeah, we're gonna try our best to go through what we can today. So let's turn to our first audience question that we couldn't get to during the show, or at least not in detail. The question was: are you seeing anything new and innovative in the IoT space, or Industrial Internet of Things, specifically for manufacturing plants? Obviously, we talked a lot about the supply chain, but our audience was keen to know what you were seeing in the plants themselves.
Yeah, I think there's a wide variety of activity taking place right now, from trying to improve the connectivity in plants, trying to put, improve the Wi-Fi situation, move to 5G, things like that. So there's a lot of basic blocking and tackling that I think is taking place to get the ball rolling, to be able to provide the connectivity necessary to really enable IoT. We've seen a lot of advancements in more of the traditional things you think about around predictive maintenance, real-time monitoring of machines. It all started with connecting individual machines initially, and now we're starting to move beyond that and connecting entire lines, and starting to really think about the internet, extending the Internet of Things beyond just one machine, monitoring that machine's performance, ensuring that you're optimizing your assets and what have you, now to trying to get that visibility across the entire production system. And that's where we're starting to see a lot of interesting things around the digital twin, taking a look at what might be done to optimize the production process, improve throughput ultimately. And then we're also seeing other approaches, if that's more of a simulation model-based approach in a way to optimize. There's other perhaps lower tech versions where they're acting as a platform to integrate all of the disparate systems and data. And I think we got a question on that, so I think we'll be addressing that a little bit later. But that's one of the big advancements I'm seeing, is these platforms to help to tie all of the disparate data and control systems and operating systems together. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more advancements that are going to really help to improve production, identify those opportunities to improve efficiencies, and really start to see some material benefits. In the early days, it's been more marginal marginal improvements, but I think we're going to start to see a lot of acceleration from here.
Great, Bart. That's a great, very fascinating insight there. And of course, we talked a couple of weeks ago as well about seeing perhaps some acceleration of some of these trends, perhaps in the wake as well of the crisis, where things like social distancing and are putting perhaps even more pressure on automating certain areas and where we can reduce human interaction. I mean, that might be with us for a short time or a long time, but either way, it seems that the accelerating of those trends is on the agenda.
Absolutely. The automation journey started a long time ago and continues at pace. I remember working in design for manufacturability and assembly back in the 80s with some of the early automated assembly equipment coming over and being implemented in various places. But at EY, we look at automation from three different perspectives. We think about it in terms of assistive technologies or physical automation, and then lastly, enabling automation. In terms of the assistive technologies, it's things like smart glasses or point-of-use technology, smart labels, augmented reality for perhaps working on machines, things like that. The second one being the physical automation, things like additive manufacturing or 3D printing, automated storage and retrieval systems, AGVs, and the like. And then lastly, the third being enabling automation. And this is really where I think we're seeing the most advancements given COVID. It's an easier return on investment. There's a lot you can do with advanced analytics and trying to improve visibility. And so that's where I think a lot of the money's going as we try to react to the COVID situation, increase our flexibility, increase our agility. It's really having that control tower in place to get that visibility. It's having the artificial intelligence and the machine learning algorithms to help you better predict demand and align supply with that demand. Dynamic synchronization and what have you. Certainly RPA, it's one of the more basic types of automation, robotic process automation, but I think we're seeing a tremendous leverage of RPA currently, and I expect more of it going forward. It's really allowing our clients to stop focusing on the mundane and spend more time focusing on the value add. And so as we're having to deal with different work situations, working remotely, trying to do more with less, I think that's an easy layup from an automation standpoint. Next would be the analytics and the stuff around the enabling automation that I mentioned. And then, there are still capital investments being made in physical automation, and I think those will continue. But budgets are tight. There's a lot of competing priorities right now. So I think we'll see it more in that enabling technology before it gets in the other areas around the physical or assistive technologies, just from a priority standpoint. I think all are important. I think all will continue to move forward. I do believe COVID has increased the pace at which we will see these changes. It's going to be just a matter of managing budgets and making the trade-offs to where the return on investment can be gained quickest with the biggest impact.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Well, that actually, goes some way towards answering, I think, our next question. So let me pull up then where we are, where we just talked a bit about this. If you can see it, what areas of the supply chain would you identify as most ripe for automation? I think you've done a good job outlaying some of that in terms of what you see coming down. One of the topics that came up quite a bit, in the live stream show, and also what we heard from Ford and what you were outlining is digital twinning. So, how significant a role do you see digital twinning playing in the supply chain from a practical point of view, sort of now and then its stages in development in the future?
Yeah, at EY, we're extremely bullish about digital twins, and we really believe that it's going to become the most preeminent capability over the next 5 years. It's going to be a price of entry. As we talked before, we've spent a lot of time in supply chain focusing on improving the efficiency and effectiveness of our operations, perhaps at the cost of agility and flexibility. I think COVID has taught us, and perhaps global trade has helped us understand the need for perhaps a bit more agility in our processes. So I think that it's really going to be important that we start to use these tools to improve the end-to-end visibility of the supply chain. In a recent survey that we ran, among supply chain professionals, 46% of the respondents strongly agreed that the future belongs to digitally networked supply chains, and the digital twin is really the best representation of that vision in our view. So for supply chains, the benefits of having a digital twin are really profound. It mirrors all of the supply chain and the assets within the supply chain, the transactions, the third-party relationships, and other operational details. So it really does enable that sophisticated real-time monitoring and managing of the supply chain. And so I think absolutely we're going to see it increase in importance, moving from just different silos where, for instance, we're doing a lot of work on digital twin to optimize throughput at a given production facility. I think the future is connecting the usage of products in the field, leveraging that data. We've done some work where we're leveraging that to improve warranty and so on and so forth. So we've seen digital twin be kind of applied and experimented with in different areas of the value chain. I think over time we're going to see more connectivity of that value chain and truly working towards a digital twin that represents kind of the life cycle of that product, if you will.
Very interesting. And so obviously, as you mentioned there, then that life, so starting right from it, the kind of engineering and development phase through to production and service afterwards in terms of planning and
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're definitely seeing it in the PD space and throughout the other stages of the value chain as well, as you suggested, for sure.
Absolutely. Great. Well, let's go to another question. How is interface management going to evolve in the future? Do you see automation in this area anytime soon?
I'm not sure we're going to see automation in this area. Perhaps, down the road. It's a very important topic, one that I think we've made some progress on, but one that I think is still a long road to hoe. It would be great to have open and more standardized interfaces to truly enable IoT, but I think we're still a ways away from that. As an example, we still see a huge divide between IT and OT. Back office ERP systems don't always play nicely with manufacturing shop floor systems. And it's very difficult when you're implementing, say, a new ERP system, to connect everything because you may need to dramatically customize what you've already implemented on the manufacturing floor, or vice versa. You might need to dramatically customize what you're doing from an ERP standpoint. That's not in vogue. Folks are trying to get more standard from an ERP standpoint. So there's the rub. And so we also see this in other automation technologies like AGVs. Different hardware providers have different controllers, different operating systems, and our clients would very much like to have a mission control screen where they could monitor all of their assets and manage them accordingly. That's a challenge given the competing or different operating systems. So really what I think we're going to see are more platforms that come into play to help enable really the future of the Internet of Things and automation, and having those platforms have all of the necessary integrations and APIs to talk to the various systems, whatever those might be. I was on a call earlier this week learning about a new technology that does just this. I know there's a lot of folks working on in this space on solutions for this, but that's what I see happening, is essentially platforms that the disparate systems, machines, assets can then plug into to provide that higher level of visibility.
Okay, yeah, very interesting, Bart. Thanks again for that insight. Let's go to another audience question. Do the new digital tools and capabilities such as smart factories reduce the economies of scale in assembly and some manufacturing processes? I suppose we might also wonder if it's reducing some degrees of flexibility, but that question was kind of particularly about economies of scale. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I don't believe that these digital tools are going to necessarily decrease economies of scale. In fact, I believe they can help to improve economies of scale if, in fact, that's the objective. Again, we've been talking about how historically our supply chains have been very cost-focused. We've been trying to, become more efficient and drive out waste through all of our lean efforts over the years, and now we're talking about the need perhaps to pivot back towards a bit more agility and flexibility. So I do believe that smart factory technologies can allow firms to absolutely do more with less. There's no doubt about it. One operator was dedicated to perhaps one machine. In the future, that's not going to be the case. They're going to be able to float across multiple machines because of all of the virtual and smart technologies that are going to exist. I think what we'll see, though, is as more customization is demanded by our customers, clients, and what have you in the marketplace in general, we're going to need to use these technologies to improve the flexibility of our manufacturing processes without driving up too much cost. So it's going to be that balance of trying to achieve the customer expectations, providing more flexibility, but do it in a lean and cost-effective manner. So I do believe that you could see less economies of scale, but I think in some cases that's going to be intentional to try to sacrifice economies for more agility and flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess especially when we get into areas of distributed manufacturing and somewhat more localized, specialized areas, and deliberately that's to kind of perhaps increase resiliency in one area, but at the expense of an economy of scale. So, yeah, interesting how that could sort of contradict some of the other trends of the past years, especially in automotive. Let's go to another audience question. So the question. And this one, particularly relevant, perhaps, Honda mentioned there, you see, did Honda not invest enough in cybersecurity? That might be not so easy to answer. Does it suggest that OEMs need to invest in more greater smart systems? I think two things to clarify there for anyone who's watching this. This question came in the week that Honda obviously suffered a ransomware attack and had to shut down pretty much all of its global plants for a short period. So, I guess beyond necessarily just the Honda scenario, I mean, clearly, if you have thoughts on that, by all means, weigh in it. But in terms of cybersecurity and the risks that a fully highly connected factory and supply chain kind of bring with it, well, the Honda example certainly is an illustration of that. So I wondered, if you wanted to weigh in on that more.
Absolutely. Less so on the Honda front. They're a great client of ours, so I'm not going to speak directly about them. But generally in automotive, cyber has definitely increased in importance. It's top of mind of all of the key executives. It's a very important thing to be looking at, and it's pervasive. It's not just the production facilities. It's connected vehicle data. What are we going to do with that? So there has definitely been an increased focus on cyber security and ensuring not only that your facilities, that your systems are protected, but there's, I think, as we talked before, from a supplier risk management or third-party risk management standpoint, OEMs are starting to monitor and assess the cyber capabilities of suppliers or other third parties as well. This is a big deal. And so we work with our clients to help them see, to help them use this to build trust with their customers, right? This is going to be increasingly important to ensure that you can provide the privacy and safety of your data and all of your transactions. So we're really working across our cyber practice to help our clients leverage cyber as a differentiator, really to help them, as I said, drive more trust with their clients, and we believe that could have premiums in the future as well. So it's a challenging area, though, and one that's competing for limited resources right now. Let's be real. We're in a very difficult time with COVID-19, and funds are tight, working capital is tight, so it's a question of where you're investing. There's no doubt that everybody believes in the importance of it, more so recently than ever before, and wants to do something about it. It's a question of managing those scarce resources. So I think it's going to continue to only increase in importance, and we'll likely see more funds headed in that direction.
Absolutely, and I mean, obviously, not least in the context of obviously there's the plant, but there's also more remote working. Obviously, people connected across the value chain, from many different locations, and I'm sure that obviously also weighs and highlights the importance of cyber secure networks in a connected enterprise.
Yeah, not to mention the connected vehicles. I mean, we've already seen vehicles that have been hacked. That's a huge concern as we move closer and closer to autonomy. So that's going to be a huge area and not an easy one to solve based on the few conversations that I've had on the topic.
Absolutely. We won't go down that rabbit hole now, but obviously you can. There's well documented just how many exposures there are on many vehicles in terms of data leaks and ability to hack that. So absolutely. Let's go to another question. So this speaks to a theme that obviously was coming up in some of your presentation, and which we here discussed a lot in the context of the current crisis, is potentially seeing a shift towards more regional supply chains. And so again, here this was sort of addressing that point. Does having a more regional supply chain might create a resilient model, but does it also sacrifice the economies of scale? That's a little bit related to the last point on technology, but this one more specific, I think, to some of the sourcing and localization sides. Clearly, again, risks of losing some economies of scale. Would they, in your view, add up to make it worthwhile?
I think so. I mean, we all know the cost of shutting down a production facility. It's huge, right? So that's the focus. We want to keep the plants running. And I do believe that a more regional model could absolutely negatively impact the economies of scale, but it could be very worthwhile given the cost of downtime from a production standpoint. So I think we're going to see that. Hopefully we're going to have better tools and analytics to make more informed decisions about that moving forward. But I do believe we could see some loss of economies of scale. But as we started, trying to improve our flexibility and agility, this is one way that could help us and increase the resiliency of our supply chain from events like COVID-19 or significant weather events or what have you. So I think it's going to be studied very closely. As we talked before in the webinar, no one size fits all. It's going to be based on the commodity and the priorities of certain commodities, and ensuring that those plants can keep running. So it's going to be a mixed bag, I think, but yes, we will lose economies where we want to have a little bit more resiliency, but that payoff could be well worth it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on the kind of complexity of the sourcing side of it there. Certainly, I think good chance we see some shifts regionally, but obviously to speak in just broad terms, obviously misses some of the points when particularly around some commodities which are very regionally focused, but that could be an objective kind of even beyond the automotive industry to regionalize aspects of that. We see that from some kind of as a priority in some places as well. So I think we had another
one that we didn't.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the other question,
one
thing that we didn't touch on were some of the more unique local customer requirements that could drive sourcing decisions as well. Just beyond trying to put more resiliency into the supply chain, there's absolutely a potential to consider some of those sourcing decisions to better meet and exceed customer expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I often speak to when we speak to people about this is the understanding that the proximity between engineering and development and production can also be quite advantageous in this way, because engineering changes and the like, which require have in the past required lots of stops and starts and moving things around to deal with that, can actually make up. Maybe in the digital twin world we get around some of that more. So that could play roles as well. I think the other question that we had related to this was actually whether in the kind of shift to regional supply chains, if there's any particular winners or losers that you, from your perspective, could see emerging from that. So whether particular regions that might stand out as likely candidates to see some key shifts there.
I think, there's a lot of questioning of China right now as tensions increase between the U.S. and China. But, I don't know that those shifts are going to be that significant in the near term. We'll definitely see how things play out. There could be losers from these very large global contracts that get chunked up perhaps and given to different regional suppliers. But in all reality, what I more expect to see happening is collaboration between the supply base and the OEMs to find a better way to maintain their contracts with the OEMs, but provide that flexibility and agility and really resilience that their customers, the OEMs, are looking for. So will there be winners and losers? Absolutely. Regional, yes, potentially, likely, based on a lot of factors, frankly. But the automotive industry has been global for a very long time. Suppliers are very global. So I think you're going to see a lot of collaboration once we get on the back end of COVID to really think about how we can make more resilient supply chains. And, frankly, they're going to try to keep as much business as possible while starting to provide some of the value-added resiliency, if you will.
Let's go to another audience question that we had, kind of related on the globalization front. Obviously, trade wars and tensions certainly remain significant. We can think about the U.S.-China side of here. Obviously, here where I am, Brexit might have been hidden below COVID in the headlines for a while. It's starting to rear its head certainly again. We've heard recently of the lobster tax. Maybe that's going to be the next course from the chicken tax. But what role do you see these having on the wider automotive supply chain in the coming years?
I think they're going to be profound, but we'll see certain activity and perhaps not other activity. I think from a global trade standpoint, again, folks are going to be looking at that improved flexibility, agility. So you might be rethinking sourcing decisions. You're now having folks look at monitoring or looking at total landed costs as a part of the sourcing process more now than ever before, right? It's not just about piece price. It's not just about the transportation costs. It's about the total landed costs. And so taking into account the customs duties, taxes, all of that, you're going to see a lot of focus on that to be able to keep the plants running, given perhaps new tensions here, there, or elsewhere. So being able to monitor that and then react accordingly is, I think, where the focus is going to be. It's where there's been some talk about changing footprints, right? DCs or manufacturing facilities. I think those are going to be moves that are perhaps a bit slower in the making. I know a lot of folks are taking a look at their manufacturing footprint, so I do believe it'll come. Those moves are very thoughtful, and so it probably will take a little bit longer. I'm seeing more activity, however, on the DC and warehousing standpoint. I do believe there's going to be some movement on that front. From an aftermarket and an OEM part standpoint, really taking a look at the network to see if there's opportunities to better optimize that. So sourcing basically, then footprint analysis. Within footprint analysis, probably more warehouses, distribution centers versus actually production facilities.
The other question actually was on this was the role that digital tools and technology could play in mitigating trade barriers and uncertainty. Now that may not, digital tools may not help when there's a tariff there, but nonetheless, there's many kinds of trade barriers and many ways that trade kind of get interrupted. So do you see digitalization of trade processes as an important factor?
Absolutely. Very much so. In a couple different areas. We've got a solution right now that leverages publicly available transaction data that we can get from the appropriate government, be it the U.S. or Mexican government or Canadian government or international countries. And then we have the analytics to run our clients' data through our analytics and then identify where those opportunities are from a customs duties or tax standpoint so that they can, work on those particular issues. It's very low touch for our clients. We just need their permission to leverage their publicly available data. Once we have that, then we can work with them. The other side of the equation is helping our clients to better evaluate that total landed cost that we talked about. So we have some analytic solutions to help then think through that complete cost breakdown versus just looking at piece price transportation or what have you. And then looking at the different routing options. So I do believe there's a lot of technology that's coming to bear to help our clients optimize their sourcing decisions and then optimize the logistics as well.
We've got two more questions that we had wanted to get to from our audience. So let's pull those up. So one, there's a lot of debate over whether automotive industry will see fundamental changes in its lean or JIT production models. So do you see any evidence that it should or will or should change?
Yeah, I think it's a terrific question, one that's being asked a lot right now. And, perhaps the hypothesis is that, some firms may have over-indexed from a focus on efficiency and effectiveness and just in time and what have you, given the need to be more responsible and agile in today's environment. But by no means do I expect us to walk away from those concepts. I believe it's going to be leveraging technology to gain that visibility required to make better real-time decisions, better analytic tools to prescribe the best path forward, or at least have recommendations and things like that. So I don't believe we're going to walk away from it. I believe there may be some tweaks to improve the resiliency, but at the end of the day, it's always been an effort to do more with less, and I think technology is in fact going to help us to do that. Where we need to have bigger buffers, where we may need more safety stock, we'll do that. But the overall principles, the underlying principles, I should say, of just-in-time and lean, I don't think are going away anytime soon. In fact, I think they're going to be enhanced by some of the technologies and approaches being embraced today.
That is one of my favorite questions at this moment in time. And I think, like anything, you have to look at a given plant, a given product or model or pace and production, obviously, to really understand it in full. But given the disruption that we see right now and some of the uncertainty in the supply chain, it's also not surprising to see some shifts perhaps towards resiliency there. But I think the balance with technology will certainly be the interesting side to come. So let's
on that note,
please.
Chris, I think in times like this, there's a lot of reaction. Right. So you might see inventories get inflated and, different practices being implemented just to get things up and running again, just to get the ball rolling. But once you get to that steady state, then it's going to, again, where can we reduce costs without negatively impacting that resiliency? So I think we may see the pendulum swing a little bit too far, but then very quickly come back to focusing on operational excellence and improving those efficiencies.
The last question that we were going to cover today, we'll just pull it up here from our audience. Is the automotive sector making positive moves towards more advanced S&OP, sales and operation planning and demand planning? And I think, again, thinking of that in the context of difficulty of those disciplines right now, given the crisis and uncertainty, but nonetheless underlying their importance, integrated organizations, visibility, cross-functionality, that sort of planning. We see it in other sectors perhaps more, but what's your view on the automotive side for this?
There's a big focus on it. A lot of our clients are moving in this direction, implementing different ERP systems to enable the integrated business planning or sales and operations planning processes. And I do believe that technology has been very helpful in that regard. It's helped to streamline the process between the relevant departments in a given organization. It's helping to improve the quality of data that's shared across the enterprise. And so I do believe that technology has really helped companies move forward in this regard. And there's a lot of focus on trying to make this process as efficient as possible. So while we've seen some great advances, it's only as good as the information that you're putting in. And right now, that's a bit of a struggle with COVID-19 is a lot of the demand models are based on historic performance. Those are thrown out the window right now as we're starting to ramp up. So we've been talking to our clients about how in this near term, can they perhaps change their approach to demand forecasting to take into account more real-time variables, perhaps more granular inputs from local areas within the US. What can we do to provide a higher resolution demand signal to allow the overall sales and operation planning process ultimately come up with the best answer? So I think, there's a lot of focus on that. There's been a lot of focus on the overall process. Technology has dramatically helped. A lot of the ERP packages are working very hard on improving their analytics and their demand forecasting abilities, being able to take into account external variables. So that's all been great. I think the last mile is going to be that synchronization with the production facilities, with the factories, right? That's all. So we've made dramatic improvements between kind of the planning process, and I could very easily see the path to, lights out or autonomous planning, but really building that bridge to the factory and synchronizing with the manufacturing systems. I think we still have a ways to go. We talked earlier about that need for improved IT and OT kind of connectivity. So that's the last mile I think we'll get to, but absolutely I think we've seen some dramatic improvements and a lot of great strides in this area for sure.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's encouraging that we see those improvements. I do think there's a long way to go, and I think you just have to look at the complexity of most manufacturers' networks to get a bit of understanding as to why, when you have so many legacy systems tangled up and so many disparate organizations which don't always don't sync up quite as easily as we might think that they should. From our experience, obviously looking at things like the Volkswagen Industrial Cloud with Amazon and other moves in this direction certainly point towards more integration. But I think, like I said, it's encouraging and necessary, especially at this within this crisis, to see that. I think it was interesting from my point of view to see it started to happen in a kind of manual way, in the sort of task force kind of war room style reactions that most of the companies have gone into, kind of since the beginning of the crisis, right? Since China shut down and okay, where is everything and how do we do? And okay, let's really work together. I guess my hope is sort of that kind of carries over in a more day-to-day or strategic way, as we move into the next phases of recovery and indeed beyond.
Yeah, I definitely believe that the crisis has accelerated a lot of advancements in technology, ranging from just virtual meetings and collaboration platforms to thinking about how to accelerate automation in certain areas and leveraging technology in others. So absolutely, I think we've seen, at least 3 years of advancements condensed into a much shorter period of time.
Fantastic. Well, Bart, thank you so much for taking more time to go through our audience questions, as well as my questions, as well as all of your great insight as well from the live stream session. Again, I would encourage all of our audience to go back and watch that if you didn't. Lots of great insight, and obviously you can get in touch with Bart if you want more there too. Let me also again thank our partners in the Festival Transformation and the live stream series: Proact International, Fract Logistics Solutions, CNW Courier Network, and Hall Horizon Auto Logistics. Again, a little flash forward, Bart's co-panelist and co-guest from the live stream hour, Amlan Bose. I will be joining him in Your Questions and Answers Part 2, because we also had a lot of questions specific to Ford and some of the system, of course, that it's implemented for its global supply chain. So watch out for that release that will follow this one. And just keep up with us, hopefully, over the next coming weeks and months as we dig deeper into the industry, and lots of stuff coming. If you're interested in technology, please be sure to come back for our show July 1st. We're going to be talking with Volkswagen more about how some digitalization initiatives there, together with Fraunhofer and some startups and things. So lots of content there, but more and more to come. And this is only a partial schedule, because we got a lot more to sort of go just before the end of July, when we'll take a short break and come back for an event in the new season later in the year in September. Get in touch with me or our team for any questions that you have or ideas. We're always open and excited to hear from you. So please do so. And we look forward to keeping up with you and seeing you for more live shows, more Q&As, and more follow-up. So thanks again for everyone. Thanks to Bart, and have a great day and stay safe.
Very good, and thanks to the audience for all of the questions. I greatly appreciate it. Chris, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you in this conversation. I love the program you have going right now, so I look forward to seeing the future sessions that are on your schedule. Thanks again, and have a great day.
You too, and we look forward to welcoming you back again. Thanks again, Bart.
Take care.